This is Ann Davis, and today is August the 26th, 2020, and I am privileged today to be interviewing Vant Hardaway. And Vant, we appreciate so very much you coming and your willingness to do this. I wanted to start by asking you, were you born and raised in McMinn County?
I was raised in McMinn County, but not born, and so I will just sort of say to you, thank you for at least letting me come and just share a little bit. I don't know, sometimes I start thinking, I said, what? How do I get into this? I go back and think about some of the things that people have done with interviews, the chronicles of this or chronicles of that. I don't know what the series is called, but I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1950. My dad was a minister and pastor, and he traveled. And so in 1957, he came to Athens to work with a church here. And so that year I would have been coming up on my 7th birthday. So I came to Athens in 1957, and from 1957, we moved about July of that year, and I was sort of raised here the rest of that time until after I finished undergraduate school. So I was raised a better part of my life in Athens from 7 on till I graduated from college.
Good. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about your childhood or your family?
Well, Lord, there's a lot that I can talk about. We go back and we look at the times that we have gone through, and when you go back and look at the 50s and those times that would come up, and it was a different time. Sometimes we say it was, I guess, the best of times, and some people would probably use that adage to say the worst of times, but I won't say it was the worst of times. It was a different time. When I'm talking to you, you've already given us the day and this year. We're in a difficult time now, but in the South, in the 50s, I can go back and talk about early 1950, Birmingham, Alabama, for those that are historians and think about the times we were in. That was a difficult time for African Americans as we go. If you go back and look at the history of that, you would hear name changes and different things happen. I know Dr. King was very active in looking at doing his lifestyle. It was the Negro, and if it was not good names, some other names that African Americans were being called. And now we've gone through the black period of time where as a corporate group, maybe some people call blacks or sometimes now African Americans. And so I usually stay with whatever is going. But my childhood and I've said this very often, both my mother and dad are deceased now, but we didn't have a lot based on what people think about economically. But I think many of the people that were in our area, we didn't know it, and maybe I was more in poverty than I knew. We were poorer than we knew with dollars and cents, but we had a great deal of love and coming together. My dad was a minister and traveled a good deal, but Mother raised us and kept the family together. When we moved to Athens, I had one sister who was about 6 years older than I am, than I was even at that time. But it was Mom, Dad, and the two of us. And then later on, I had a brother and sister was born. They were born in Athens, but I wasn't. But we had a lot of warmth and love in the family and support, good nuclear family. So we grew up there during those years, and I'm sure maybe I'll talk a little bit about my school environment, but that was during what we call the segregated times, and we were in separate times while we worked with people, new people, but the lifestyles were very separate. We were still doing the old separate but equal times that came together before the Civil Rights Act. But I went to J.L. Cook School, but I had a good family life, and as I said, we didn't want for anything because our parents made that commitment that we would have what we needed. And so I had, when I look back over it, had a good childhood, had a good family togetherness, and the people we lived in. I grew up in an area in Athens, Tennessee that we called Free Hill. I'm sure with some of the people you've talked to have talked about Free Hill, and there's a marker at the YMCA now that sort of sets that area, and if they go up and they read the marker right across from the YMCA, it talks about Free Hill. That was sort of the area that we grew up in. All of us that lived in that area, it was sort of like a little family community. And but it, the 50s, the 60s, it was a time while things were not like maybe we wanted them to be, but it was a comfortable time because we adjusted and we recognized the time, we recognized history and what it tended to do. So it was beneficial that way.
That's wonderful, Van. You mentioned growing up in Free Hill. Was your father a pastor
Yes.
here at that time?
He pastored a church. It was the Church of God, and it was down in the lower part of what is called Free Hill. It was the street now, and I think the street is still there, but it doesn't go all the way through. And that the urban renewal time changed it. It was on Raven Street, but he came, pastored a small church. That church does not exist now in that time, and we've gone with, because eventually, even though he pastored for a number of years, it moved to the other side of town there now, and so that church is still there, but it's changed and transitioned somewhat. But he was a pastor. Mother was a domestic, had worked with some of the very notable families in Athens, and so she did those things. And I can remember we walked a lot, walked from that area. It was the area behind the, there is a funeral home there now. It's Lake Hog Hobbs. It used to be Quisenberry. And we would walk there, walk down the street to get to the downtown area. There were, in that time, there were taxi cabs. And sometimes if you walked to town, then you maybe get a taxi cab and get back home, or either you just walked. We walked. Probably was a lot healthier because we got our exercise. But he was a pastor in that area.
Well, you mentioned you attended J.L. Cook School.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that school?
Okay, J.L. Cook School, and there is a great history and heritage of great J.L. Cook, and I'm sure you've probably heard and interviewed some people that talked a little bit about that. Now, the school was already in existence when I got here. I had attended the first grade in Birmingham, Alabama. So I came and entered Cook School in my second grade year. During those times, there was not kindergarten, so it was or first grade on through. And Cook School was 1 through 12, and all of the black students in Athens, all black students from the surrounding areas, especially the high school areas, went to Cook when they got to the 9th grade. But I started in the second grade at Cook. As we said, all the black schools were there. And I learned more about it as I got along, because the school at that time, the principal was Mr. E. Harper Johnson. And many of us in this area can remember Mr. Johnson, but he was the principal. Dr. W. E. Nash, he had been prior to Mr. Johnson, but by the time I got here, he had already retired. And so we had, I went to the second grade here, and then third and fourth grade. I was sort of moved around in the grade because I moved from the second and didn't go through the full third grade because it was somewhat almost like I would call early childhood these days. Sometimes it's ungraded, because some of the things I probably learned in Birmingham as a first grader, and my sister used to teach me a lot, because in Birmingham, a larger urban city, Mother wouldn't let me just go out and hang out in Birmingham. I'd have to do some work. So my sister, who was 6 years older, when she would do homework, she'd give me homework. So I got some skills early. And then I started the third grade, and then I moved to the fourth. There was a fourth and fifth grade split. And it cooked in the elementary grades, it would go till the eighth grade. And the building, I know there's an area that's given to here at the museum that talks about, maybe have some pictures of Cook. But it had sort of grown and developed a lot more than when it had been with Dr. Nash. But the lower part of that building was 1 through 8, and then in the 9th was the upper part of the building. The city school, I think, tended to do the funding for the elementary, Athens City School System. And then the high school grades, 9 through 12, was funded and sort of, I guess, taken care of by the county. Because at the time at Cook, when you got to the 9th grade, students came from Etowah. They were bused to Cook. Students came from Calhoun that we know, and some even from Charleston area. So they went into another county. There were those that went as far away as Sweetwater, and there are some in our community even now that rode a bus from Loudon. So it crossed 2 county lines to get to Cook. School, about that time with all the black students, the most I can remember, and this is not locked in my memory as to be I could document, but probably 300 plus. But they were primarily all black students that went to that school, because the other schools, the city schools and then McMinn County High School, where we went through, were primarily for Caucasians in school, because we were in that separate but equal time. And so that was part of history.
Vant, could you tell us a little bit about the integration? You were a part of that, weren't you?
I was right in the midst of it. I was, as they say sometimes, smack dab in the middle, because as I look at it, and I've sort of followed it a little bit, my undergraduate degree was in history, so I followed a little bit of that. But the process called integration, some use it and they'll say desegregation or whatever. We came and looked at the changes coming about in the 1954 to 64. A lot of that went along with the Brown versus Topeka Board of Education when the Supreme Court made their decisions. Prior to the 54 case, it was Plessy versus Ferguson, and they said, well, you could have separate facilities. Well, in 54, they said, all right, if in the South there were separate facilities, they needed to be equal. However, in that 50-something, 54 or thereabout, all the facilities were not necessarily equal. In law, it was. Well, in 1964, I think one of the things that drove a lot of that was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Myself, and 64 was a unique time for me, because my older sister had graduated from Cook in 1962. And she had an opportunity to go on to higher ed, go to college. She wanted to be a nurse, and went to Knoxville College in 1962 and went 1 year there. But Tennessee Wesleyan College, who is now Tennessee Wesleyan University, opened up and began to accept black students in that next year, 63. And my mother had worked with a family that helped her, and it helped my sister go to Tennessee Wesleyan. Why should she go all the way to Knoxville College? And my mother found, well, I didn't think financially we didn't have any idea we could go to college. But she started at Wesleyan, 63. Well, I would walk with her to school, to college, because we didn't have transportation or cars, so I'd have to be at school when she had to do work, had late classes, to walk home with her. So in 1964, we had learned probably, if I was going to go into higher ed and go to college, and I wanted to, I had some personal goals to have a different type of lifestyle. The teachers were definitely models for me. My dad was a preacher, and he'd wear ties and so on, but I didn't necessarily want to be a preacher. But what were the other careers that blacks could have? So I wanted to go to higher ed, and they decided, and knowing that Mr. Harper Johnson tried to prepare the students that were going to move to higher education to get what you needed so they could merge into the system. So in 1964, we walked from J.L. Cook School, and I walked down the hill to McMinn County High School to take 2 classes in the afternoon. I would go to Cook in the mornings, and they worked out a cooperative program where I could take French, because if I was going to go to college, I would need to have at least a foreign language, and Cook did not have the capability. We didn't have teachers to do that. And I took biology. We had chemistry, general science, but did not have a biology lab. So I would walk down. The year was 1964. In the afternoon, I'd go walk down to McMinn County High School. It was right down the hill. Take those 2 classes. However, it was still not open for full integration or desegregation, whichever a person would like to call it. So then in 1965, the 65-66 year, there were a number of African-American families that decided, hey, our children are going to go to McMinn. It was legal. The Civil Rights Act of 64 had passed. So there were a number of students. It was probably 10 to 12 that went full-time. However, that year, I remained at Cook for the better part of my education. Well, in 1966, the decision was made in Athens, Tennessee by the quote-unquote city fathers that they were going to close and merge the total schools. In Athens City, the Athens Junior High School opened 1966. In the county, in Etowah and Inglewood, that area, McMinn Central High School, I think it's called Central High School of McMinn County, but it opened. And the students that had gone to Etowah High School, Inglewood High School, and the students that were going to Cook that were going to be in high school, then they walked in together and made Central High School. Well, we here in Athens at Cook, then we were zoned and had to come to McMinn County High School. And this is a personal time, and you just sort of give me times of how much longer I have. But we enjoyed being together. We could go and do whatever things we need to do in town, but we enjoyed being at Cook. But when that decision was made, then we knew we didn't have an option, because 66, 67, and that was my junior, that was the end of my junior year, and I was going into my senior year in high school. So I had 1 year to go to McMinn County High School.
That's just fascinating.
Well, it was a different time, and things changed. We were not all totally ready, but it was a fairly easy transition. A lot of communities did not do that well because it was just a forced situation. And in history, you can look at the South. Some things had it harder. In Athens, we went through it, but it was a challenge. It was a challenge for me being there 1 year, because there were activities that we would have been a part of at Cook. Being my senior year, I did not get a chance to do athletics, extracurricular activities. Some we were not prepared for. So as a result of that, my senior year was a little bit of a challenging year, because some of the things I had done, I did not get a chance to do. It was hard on a young boy, 16, 17, going into 17 years of age, but it worked, and so that's how I did, and I graduated from McMinn County High School in 1967.
You know, Ben, I think a lot of credit goes to the leaders in the black community at that time. They wanted a peaceful transition, didn't
Yes.
they? And from what I understand, they worked well with some of the white leaders
Yes.
in the community to assure that happening. And
Yes.
I admire so much those of you who pioneered this integration in our community, and thank you for the role you played in that.
Well, in that, the only thing I was part of was just being in it, and it happened to me. And sometimes I go back and think now, Ian, I felt like it happened to me rather than for me. I had nothing to do with it but a chance. But our parents, some of the black leaders, and there were some leaders of the white community, the city fathers had worked together. That's the reason it happened so quickly, because they were working on it and we didn't know. I didn't find out until the summer. It was like in June or July when we found out that we weren't going to be back to cook. And that was a challenge for a senior.
Oh, absolutely. I can imagine. Well, Vance, you've been recognized in many ways. You and your wife Janice are very accomplished people, highly respected in the community. And I know I was there the night you won your Man of the Year award that was presented by the Chamber of Commerce, and that was exciting. But could you tell us a little bit about your adult life, your ministry, and your work?
Okay. The 2016 was a year that I was accepted, and you need to give me about 10 minutes and I'll try those. Well, 2016 was a year that someone had nominated Vant Hardaway for Man of the Year. When I left Tennessee Wesleyan College, I graduated in 1971. I left Athens, and I personally had thought I probably never would be back in Athens to live. But I graduated with an undergraduate degree, went to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and started as a teacher and a coach at Oak Ridge High School. I had 7 good years. One of the years I had while there, I was part of a team in football that won the state championship in 1975. So I enjoyed coaching. After about 7 years there, I felt a real pull by the Lord to go into ministry. So I was an educator in the ministry. Many blacks, and it still happens right now in our community, many of the church leaders are bivocational because many small churches cannot fund a full-time pastor. So I went to, left Oak Ridge, went to Nashville, and worked with and started, was part of starting a church out of a Bible study at Fisk University. So I was in Nashville, Tennessee. My wife and I, we got married in 1975. I'm 77, we moved to Nashville. We worked with starting a church out of the Bible study at Fisk. And then I was in sales and sales management. So I got out of education, lived there 8 years, and then by some, I guess, move of God, we got back to Athens, even though I'd said I probably never would be back here to live. Mom and Dad were still here, and we would travel in and out. But I came back and was given an opportunity to teach at Athens Junior High School and coached there at Athens Junior High School, had good life and career, and it was not planned. So often, part of my life would seem like orchestrated by one bigger than me, you know, the Lord, and so we came back. And one thing that I would say, and we probably wouldn't get a chance, I felt a leading to serve, servanthood, and serve and do things, not just because I wanted to be important, but if any way I could help, I did. So after I came back, I got to working at the schools. I worked with agencies in the community. I was part of a number of agencies in Athens. I was on the boards at Tri-County Center. I was on the boards of the Senior Center. I was on the boards, and some of those I held offices. I was part of some others. So I guess people would very often they'd look up and see Vant Hardaway at different places, but I think it was because of the service we had, the service we could give in other agencies, because they were volunteer boards, and I know we know those, but I didn't recognize that I was doing anything other than, if I got an opportunity, just help. And in 2016, someone had nominated or put my name in as a possibility to be part of the Chamber of Commerce Man of the Year. Now that, I didn't realize the significance of that at that time. However, it was called the J. Neil Ensminger Man of the Year Award. And Dr. Ensminger, and I've known his family when he was at the paper. But in the years before that, 2016 was the year, I think there had been about 65. Burke Cricket Witt was one of the African Americans, the only one that had been selected at that time. And somehow, after very good friends of mine, I later on found out who nominated my name. And because of some of the things that I had an opportunity, and I would say others gave me an opportunity to be a part and to do. And I just did it for service, to help any way I could help. And out of that recognition, or out of that service, someone felt like Vant Hardaway and the things he had been able to contribute in this community. My wife had, this 2 weeks ago, on the 16th of August, we've been married 45 years, and she was an HR manager at one of the local manufacturing firms. So we had just been involved in the community, and that year, the panel selected Vant Hardaway to be the 2016 Man of the Year.
Vant, that's wonderful, and you're to be congratulated for everything you and Janice have contributed to this community. We've got a few minutes left. Tell me about your family today. I know you have some very accomplished family members, children.
Well, I'm very blessed, and I say to God be the glory. It's not about me. It's not about us. And I think it's all about when we get a chance. I have 2 daughters. And like me, I guess seemed like it rubbed off in education. I have a daughter, my oldest daughter, Vanessa. She is a kindergarten teacher in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and has been teaching, I guess, 15 years now. My youngest daughter, who was a teacher at one of our local elementary schools, but she's not teaching right now. She has 2 grandchildren for Janice and me, and Janice is retired, and so am I. And so that's my immediate family, but then I have extended family members, and of my nieces and nephews in this area. One is a elementary school principal, very new, and then I have others that are also in education. And so we find that that's part of just service, giving back. And I am no longer in ministry in the full time as a senior pastor. I had pastored in churches for about 29 years, but God assigned my wife Janice and me to do couples ministry, couples retreats, family ministries. So while we are retired from some of that, I help with a couple of agencies working with children in foster care and in homes. I'm working with the juvenile courts somewhat now. So that's what we're doing.
Well, Van, I just appreciate so much you being with us today. It's just been a pleasure to interview you, and I've been fascinated by your life and all the things that you have accomplished, and thank you for your contribution to our community and to the museum archives, because this will be something that will be in our library for history. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and I hope I don't look at them as accomplishments. I think in and see them as opportunities. One of the things in my life, if I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living's not in vain. So it's an opportunity.
What a wonderful thought. Thank you, Van.
Thank you.